Welcome, everybody. It is time to see one of the most awesome games played in recent memory between Levon Aronian and Richard Rapport. Now, Aronian is an excellent and creative and wonderful player in his own right. But when people talk about Rapport, they often talk specifically about what an imaginative player he is. Other people say what a weird player he is. I mean, certainly what stands out with Rapport is that he's perhaps the highest rated player ever to do weird stuff like 1b3 and stuff like that in tournaments. In this game, he plays a fairly unusual opening at the top level, which is the Chigorin Defense with knight c6. We looked at it a little bit last week. Well, I don't know about looked at it. We've practiced it a little bit. You guys have seen it on the show last week. Now, the Chigorin Defense was played for a while by Alexander Morozevich, but even Morozevich, I don't know that he really thought it was a great opening against 2700 opposition. I don't know if he would defend against Levon Aronian with this opening nowadays or on any day. But when Morozevich was coming up, he certainly had some offbeat openings that he used where he could exploit his more specific knowledge and creativity against 2500, 2600 level GMs who would have been more versed in the mainline openings but less versed in a surprise opening like this. But usually openings like this, even if you can play it as a grandmaster, get abandoned as a player crosses 2700. Rapport, however, still plays some really bizarre stuff. And Aronian played this knight c3 move, which we wondered about the other day, and I was wondering if I needed to take or defend it or what, and Rapport defends, which is what I had come up with, so hopefully that's correct. And then cd5, knight d5, and here we'd wondered about the variation e4, knight b4, d5, knight to d4, and how good or bad that would be. Aronian did not test it, but Rapport allowed it. So perhaps that's one sign that is a plausible way to play it as black, right? So here e5 is played. This is kind of a surprising move to me, because I would have thought the main way to play this opening at this point is the corresponding move to knight f3, fighting for these squares with this, that the corresponding move is to simply play bishop g4, right? And now and now if white plays a move like e3, then you can play e5, for example. So I would have thought this would be the natural response here, but there may be some specific problem with it somewhere with queen b3 or e4 or something. I'm not sure. Let's just check if there's any obvious mistake here. So knight e5, for example, can I take? Take, and knight c3 for black, the queen d8, rook d1, black is fine. So it's not that. That's definitely not the problem with it. I didn't think it was. Now let's try e4 and queen b3, the moves that are more likely to be problems. Start with queen b3, because that's going to be resolved faster. Queen b3, bishop takes f3. If queen here, knight d4, pawn takes, knight c2, king e2, maybe. King here, knight c3, king c2. This might be bad for black. Possibly. Is weird. What about this? This. Check. Here there's mate, knight d5, there's queen d5, queen d5. This position's actually looks bad for black. I guess they could hang on with e6. But yeah, white's got the advantage, it looks like. Can also trade here first. Take, check, Force the king to block in the bishop, and that gives us a chance to take here, but then this move wins for white anyway, even without his bishop. And etc. White can trap this knight. So knight takes d4 looks too risky, which is bad news for black. Can they play knight c3? Defending this piece, e takes f3. Yeah, and we transpose. So after knight d4, pawn takes c3, knight c2, king e2, white wins. So this looks to be the very risky line for black, queen b3. If you have to play knight b6, well, I guess that's not a guaranteed anything either. All right, let's find out what happens if you play knight b6. I guess that doesn't necessarily lose by force, because if white plays e3, you can take, and play e5, and this might be a playable position. It's not like 100% obvious to me to like just evaluate it offhand. So knight b6, sorry, I want knight b6, and now I'm going to try e5 for d5 for white. So that'll lead to taking on f3, I believe, because if knight here, then queen b5 wins. And otherwise, knight b8, knight e5 is not going to be good for black, for sure. So the only move of interest here will be bishop takes f3, e takes f3, and now the knight can move. Should I go to d4 or e5? a5 still loses. Say we come here. I'd expect just queen d1 to be annoying. e5 takes, knight takes. I mean, it's just a playable position. White's bishop pair might grant them a slight edge, but they also have doubled pawns. This doesn't look in any way like it's obvious. Maybe f4. Try and really like make some hay out of this knight. Bishop d6. Takes, bishop e3, knight f5, bishop check. Can white gain anything tangible out of this line here? I don't know. I'm going to say it's not 100% clear, but it looks a little bit risky for black. So it would take more time to figure that out, but that might be, there might be some risks involved with bishop g4, queen b3. But Rapport plays a surprising move e5. So just sacking a pawn as if it were what, like a Budapest or an England counter gambit. I mean, something really sketchy, I gotta say, is what it looks like. Falls with bishop b4. White could also play something like queen c2, but bishop d2 makes enough sense. Takes. Man, even trades off the knight, losing a tempo. You guys see how this loses a tempo? Because then he has to move this piece again. But what? Could he not do bishop g4 here? That doesn't look unplayable for black. I'm not sure why he feels the need to play knight c3. Maybe he wanted to give white this doubled pawn. Maybe he actively wanted to trade on c3, like give up one tempo to make one pawn weakness for white. So anyway, so development, and Aronian comes up with this queen maneuver trying to make it more difficult for him to get his pawn back on e5. But it seems he could play queen e here and rook here, right? And just get it back? Let's see. Queen e7, h4. And now Rapport just said, yeah, I was planning to just Budapest Blackmar-Diemer England this pawn all along. But we must ask ourselves, why not rook to e8? And then we must answer ourselves, bishop to b5 maybe? Black had a mate in 2 a second ago with knight c2. No, I don't think so. I mean, unless you've got like 5 minutes of lag, but I don't know that we missed a mate in 2. But I have no way of knowing in which position you mean it. Sorry. Bishop d7. So if you want to keep the pawn, you gotta trade off like so. And even then, black can take and take back. I don't see the problem for black. I don't see it at all. e4 maybe to keep the knight and keep the pawn. This is like a lot that white's trying to hold on to with some very passive pieces. I mean, this looks totally fine for black. I don't see what the point of h4 is here. Realistically, no clue. I guess I haven't made use of the move h4 at all in the way I've played for white, so... That's hilarious, Crawler. So, like, there's that old thing, like, when you see a good move, wait, look for a better one, which is, like, okay sometimes, but other times, like, that's really bad time management, right? Like, when you see a good move, double check it and then play it. Is another theory that a lot of people use. Probably more often. But you're saying that Rapport, when he sees a better move, says, okay, what other move can I play that's not the best move? Like, what's the second best move that's like kind of weirder that I can play? But what the heck is the point of this h4 move? I think if I don't understand the point of it, I can't understand why Rapport plays f6 instead of just rook e8 and taking this pawn. So, what is white gunning for? Is he looking to play knight g5 for some reason? Is there anything here for white? I completely failed to see the danger to black. Because the thing is, this knight is covering the bishop on d3, right? I can play the other move order for white, but still knight e5 going after this. So what's the scheme here? What is the scheme? Right? If white just trades everything off now, I certainly don't see how these two moves are particularly favoring him in the endgame, right? Looks like black just has a slight advantage because of the split pawns. So, what else is the idea after knight e5? I mean, tuck the bishop, sack it, come here, threaten mate for one move, and then after knight g6, the initiative is done. Maybe bishop c4? But again, on bishop c4, also knight e5 hits the bishop. So then, oh, knight e5, queen e5 take. With the bishop, please. All right. All right, so bishop c4, that prevents knight e5. So then I have to play something like bishop e6, trying to renew what I'm up to. If white just trades, now is he out of stuff? There's still knight e5, if queen e5, queen f7. I mean, I just completely don't believe this for white. I think this is borderline good for black. I mean, I don't know what the point of any of this is. It's not like you're going to mate black ever. Queen f5 or h6 or whatnot. Queen e7, queen e4. Okay. Knight g5, queen e7, queen e4. And then on g6, h5. But then there's queen g5, you see? I don't feel like white has enough like potent stuff in any of these positions to really bother black. I mean, in this line he could play f4. And then it's like some work to break this up, but it feels like it'll be good work. I mean, black's like got much better pieces. I'm feeling like there's a sack coming that white's not going to recover from. Like f6, you know? Like check. And if you take here, the rook takes back. And if you take here, the rook takes back or queen takes back. You see what I'm saying? White can't get both the rook and the queen here. You can go queen c4 and then king g7 and then takes and takes. And now he's coming under attack in the center. I completely don't believe any of this. All right, so me personally, I'm not down with this h4 move by Aronian. I cannot figure out what the idea could be or how it could be playable for him. And Rapport just plays f6. Like, I don't even need to go take that pawn. I'm just going to open the next file. You've played a stupid move as far as like he's going to play a Blackmar-Diemer gambit now, right? With this pawn and this pawn missing. Well, we can play another move and you can see it. If there were pawns here and here, do you see that this would be the Blackmar-Diemer gambit? Guys? So he's like, you've played this stupid h4 move. I'm ahead in development by a little bit. So, you know, I'll just play the Blackmar-Diemer now. Don't know what's wrong with bishop e6. Looks like a good move as well. King h8 anyway, here. Just trades off a piece. Man, he's really confident in his compensation here. For the pawn, he is playing this like absolutely unconcerned. All right, so let's see, what are the interesting possibilities for white here? I mean, it's definitely clear what kind of compensation he has. To me, he's got pressure on the f file with the second rook coming over here. If white ever castles kingside, then there's a potential for sacking on f3. If white ever castles queenside, there's weaknesses there, and he can, you know, swing pieces there as well. And if white leaves the king here, then white never coordinates the rooks, right? So basically, his compensation is kind of like it's kind of partly that once white's played h4, they don't have an obvious thing to do with their king. So, and basically he's going to go for f-file pressure while he builds up if white doesn't find a way to organize. So Aronian plays knight g5 and gives up the e5 square. I don't quite follow that, but I imagine he was getting partly scared of this sack. Not yet, though. I don't think knight g5 is forced in any way. So this. Okay, so now he's threatening knight d3, and that gets him to castle. Now he's threatening knight f3, and that white's queen can't stay in the kingside area. So this is pretty slick. That's very unfortunate for white. I wonder if white could play king h1 instead. Basically, he's also using this and this to keep black from winning this. So it's kind of a complicated moment here tactically. Let's say black just plays knight to g6, opening this attack. If the queen stays on the 4th rank defending the h-pawn, then queen d2 will probably win. I'm going for knight f7 maybe for white, but it doesn't win back enough unless I also have a follow-up on the d file. Okay, and someone in our chat is telling us that after h4, the confusing moment that I stopped at, their computer says that they really like bishop d7 for black. So just getting out of the way of like getting in front of bishop b5 type ideas and planning to play this rook to e8. That's because that's going to deal with both like knight g5, bishop c4, which stopped my rook e8 in some lines, because you're going to bring this rook to e8 and then just take on e5. And yeah, okay. But that's why you need like a pretty good player if you're going to work with a computer, because otherwise you're like bishop d7. Like, I imagine, Crawler, that you were kind of confused by why bishop d7 would be really good. Anyway, back to where we're at now. We are looking at king h1 to get out of knight f3. And then here, I'd be surprised if this quite works for white. Here, maybe to have a root back into the center for the queen. And then here. And it's just not good enough for white to fight these two pieces. Anyway, he plays queen c2, getting out of the way of this. h6, chasing him here, and rook h5. Yeah, now if you play g3, I think black can play check here, and here, and here, and here. Attacking these things, and then here, 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 and voila. Getting into this endgame here. So I'm looking at like knight c3 at some point, but I'm also looking at targeting this before white gets both rooks active, because I can go after these squares. I would imagine that this endgame is winning for black. So after rook h5, white, Aronian just gives back this h-pawn and goes to develop this rook. So now Rapport is not down a pawn anymore. He's taxed white for this h-pawn move, which was part of the problem with trying to castle kingside, was having that h-pawn out there. And we just saw one example variation of how like having a weakness like breeds another weakness, and doesn't work out. So he just gives up this weakness rather than creating more weaknesses trying to defend it. But that means that now material's equal, and the black pieces are just way more active than the white pieces so far. Notably, these two, this bishop and rook, are not really living up to things. But Rapport plays this phase like a super, super perfect Blackmar-Diemer gambit. I hope everyone who was in on our Blackmar-Diemer segments is appreciating how nicely he's using the possible play on the F file and the overall piece activity playing the whole board here. Yeah, I'm with Check Ray's mate in the chat, who's saying that he assumed there was some great idea behind h4, but it looks utterly miserable in every single variation. Yeah, I mean, sometimes these h4 moves are like super brilliant. It's like a way of like using your rook and gaining some space and using some knight g5 tactics. But in this case, I don't see how it works the way Rapport played. I don't see how it works the way I would play with rook e8, and I don't see how it works the way Stockfish would play with bishop d7. It just seems like a move out of place. And I know Aronian is one of those players who's found some really great moments to play h4 and g4 in the Queen's Gambit, and some innovative uses of those moves in positions that had previously been considered like stale and played out in the center with main lines. But here it just seems like a complete flop. All right, somebody's curious why the move knight f3 check wouldn't just win the game at this point. So we are going to have a look. Maybe even here, right? With the rook here. I suppose it's playable with the rook on either square. So let's just try in one of these positions. Here, here, here. So you're threatening checkmate. There's no piece that can defend it, so all white can do is create a flight square. So rook here. And he follows his own variation by saying queen h2, king f1, and he's got nothing, question mark. And I think that is true. It's not that you've got 100% nothing, but your opponent's got a knight more than you. And it probably doesn't work. We could look at it with the rook on f8, see if there's any more follow-up on the f-file here. So let's try that again. Here, 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 and now we'll play rook f3. Okay, that's a little bit more of a potential follow-up. The problem is now the d-file's open, this refutes it. I think if white didn't have this checkmate here, you might actually have something with this idea of yours, because here you've got some pressure on f2, g3, and e3. It could actually be a problem for white. You know, you've got threats like this one. You know, as well as white having to keep this clear to deal with queen h2, queen f2. And there's a threat of, check here and then taking the knight using this. So actually, I would say that in this position here, black has enough potential pressure on the f-file that they could win with knight f3 if white's bishop were still on d2 blocking this mate. If white didn't have rook d8 mate, this would be enough pressure for black. This would be a good enough attack. Because, you know, white's playing without this bishop. His rooks aren't involved on the king side. So, yeah. So what I'm trying to say is this is completely sound if not for checkmate. Like, honestly, if your pawn were on c6, right? I know his queen's attacked here, but, like, if he had time to play c6, I think he's threatening knight f3, pawn f3, queen h3. So, yeah. And there you are. Patzer with the same idea. So it's very close to working. It's very close to working, this idea. It's definitely in the cards with rook on f8. I imagine Rapport was looking at knight f3s. Okay, so he comes queen g4. Rook d5 is played. I think he's still not threatening knight f3 because I don't think queen g4 improved it very much. I think he's just getting off of the rook, and maybe he would play c6 next and go for knight f3. Or maybe he's got knight f3 takes and queen here. No, it's not going to work that way. There's no follow-up piece to sack here. So what is Rapport going for at this point? Maybe he's threatening rook to h1 already. Hang on. Hang on, folks. Stop the presses. Let's say we play a4. Does queen g4 threaten this stupid move? If knight takes, we have mate in 1. Check here, knight here. There's no way to cover f2. I mean, there's no way to cover h2, so he's got to go here. It still doesn't quite work, does it? It's like check here, 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 here. I've got a queen against 2 rooks and a knight. It's not quite. Again, if my pawn were on c6, I would play bishop c7 and perhaps be able to make enough of a king attack to win this position. Very plausible. Queen h2 to g3. Oh, yeah. Instead of taking on f2, let's try queen g3. Okay. Now we've got maybe something going here. So now we're down in exchange with a vicious, vicious attack. The key move that we need an answer to is rook to d8. That's the key move that we need an answer to again. Because if white doesn't have something special, we're threatening rook f2. And I don't believe that moves like rook d2 and rook e2 are going to cut it. Personally, I don't think those will work. I mean, they might be able to take on e3 and win, but also if black just continues with something like this, and taking here, you know, I just think these positions won't hold together for white with the king here and like 4 inactive pieces. These things, none of them are going to work. I don't even need to calculate that. So on queen g3, the only thing we need to calculate is rook d8. However, that is a challenging move to answer. Let's see. We got knight h2 maybe. We kind of need to check here because we can't even retreat our queen to defend this rook. And if rook d8, then pawn takes. So we need this. And now if the king comes up, we have queen f2 here, here. There might be better. I'm just doing the first obvious thing I see that wins for black. So the king must come this way. And now we still kind of need a check. The king can't come this way because of mate. It's a draw. It's a draw. So I don't think he's quite threatening rook h1 yet. It looks like it only leads to a draw, but getting scary. All right. Aronian plays rook d5. Now, by the way, he could defend this, knight g4 with a very simple and crushing move, rook to h5. So Aronian, he's now, I mean, I hated his h4. I don't like how he handled the opening there with knight with h4 and this like queen f4 thing didn't quite work out to me. But now at least he's like, you know, he's played rook d1, bishop c1, rook d5 as fast as possible because he knows he needs to get some pieces into the game. Queen g5 threatening knight f3. Queen e2. So now on knight f3, queen f3 holds everything together tactically. c6. Well, this is a move that that Rapport wanted to play. I assume that f4, queen g5 is bad. And this is a fatality because this pawn can't take. So c6, rook d4, and here Rapport played the most awesome move, rook h1 check. Holy moly! I don't think this move came as a surprise to Aronian. I think Aronian was calculating these moves. He just couldn't stop them anymore. I mean, his rook was attacked. What was he gonna do? But this is just so sweet how Rapport uses what he has here in this position. So, okay. If knight h1, then it's just knight f3. You can sack the queen, but white doesn't have enough here with a rook and knight against the queen. Plus, white's still passive. So king h1 is forced. And now he takes the rook. So the point is that now if white recaptures on d4 or whatever, he plays queen h4 here and knight g4 going for mate. And now the rook moves and we use this tactic that you guys found. You check and then come back to take g3. And all the material is still equal, but this position is just coming apart. Cannot be defended for much longer. Let's see, what's the best white can do here? Maybe move like f3, but then it allows the queen to come in, and then he's just a man on the run, right? And there are like 100 different bad things that can happen. I mean, maybe he can find a square to avoid losing his queen immediately, but if he goes here, then there's rook f3 possibly instead of queen h1 because now his queen's not covering f3. With this idea, it's just an all-out massacre. Bishop e3 is the alternative to f3. Yep, that's what I was also thinking. So then again, queen here, f3, transposing maybe. So if check, bishop here, does that survive? It does. Huh. So also in my f3 variation, queen h2, there would be bishop e3 probably, right? Okay, so maybe I should have done this more straightforward variation. Winning everything instantly. And now let's return to bishop e3 and see if we can refute bishop e3. I wonder if we can refute it with the same knight h2 here. It's a little worrisome that our queen is in trouble there. So here, knight check, queen takes. Doesn't work for black. So what should we do about this? Yeah, now on queen h2, there's also possibly queen g4. I mean, you can go through h4, but the problem is still this move f3. So check here, check here, check. You can't block on g2 because of queen e1, queen e3. If king here, rook f3, bishop f2, queen h3, king here. This is not over yet. I mean, black definitely has a draw, but they don't yet have a win, do they? Nope. Not that I see. Maybe with the king here, you now play queen into here, threatening knight f3. Bishop f2, king h1. I'm afraid if king here that knight takes, pawn takes, and the king's just trapped over here. Like something like this. So queen g3, bishop f2, trying to deal with knight f3 with this move again. But now there's rook takes, bishop takes, rook here. You get this rook and pawn ending. Black's up one pawn, but I wouldn't say that's 100% decisive. This is not that simple to finish off, actually. I'm not 100% sure of the win without taking tons of time, or maybe it's not even there. Definitely queen g3 here. Oh my goodness, someone just found rook f3. Thank you. But bishop e3, sorry, is the move that we have to start with, right? Bishop e3. And now yeah, f3 we'd already beaten in other ways. So bishop e3, now we have like queen h4, f3. So rook f3 maybe? I still don't see how to win it. Yeah, I just don't. I don't see the finale myself personally. Sorry. Rook f3 before queen h4. Jeez. You want to just like try and bottle everything in here. So rook f3. Like the classic obstruction sacrifice, even though there's almost nothing left. So pawn takes and queen takes both lose to knight h2. And black's plan is to then play what? What would we play next from here? If we play queen h4 or queen h2 from here, white might be able to play queen f3. I guess the threat is queen h4. Yeah, queen h4 is the threat here. Because then if queen f3, you have knight h2. So rook f3 first, threatening queen h4. My goodness, our group think is coming up with some good moves now. Oh, but someone's saying, yeah, white can do this. And the problem is your queen is hanging to this pawn. So rook f3 doesn't work. All right, so we're going to leave this as an open question. Black's obviously better here after bishop e3. I found at least one variation with the pawn up endgame. And we found like 100 perpetuals, but we haven't found the clear knockout here. Certainly a good position for black. After bishop d4, Aronian did not even take it. He played f3 to deal with knight knight g4, and Rapport just retreats his bishop. So he has recovered the rook that he sacked. And what has he gotten out of this whole brilliant rook h1 maneuver? He's only gotten one single thing. He's gotten white to play f3. So he's created one new weakness for white. But actually this f3 move weakens g3 and e3. So he's definitely got something to work with here as far as dramatically increasing the activity of this bishop on b6. And white has to come up with a new thing to do about this knight here. So the knight moved. He checks. And chasing. And running. And goes to cut him off. Looks like white can't really control knight d3. If knight to c5, black could play, oh, many, many, many brutal things. b6 would be one just to force through knight d3. Queen h4 might also hurt. Because if you block like with the queen, there's knight d3, bishop g3. And then if this move, now b6, I guess, is even better, because now knight d3 gets this piece. So bishop d2, so that the king can cross the d file here. Rapport swings his queen around. The material is like completely equal. White still has a good square for a piece. There's still some kind of struggle, but Rapport is really just chasing this king, just non-stop. g4, looking for some counterplay, I think. Queen b5, going to b1. Now if queen b1, king here. And you get this, but white got time for some counterplay, right? You spent too many moves capturing an a pawn. That's not really the crux of the position. It might be playable for black, but if white's able to open either of these files here, then suddenly his rook and queen will be really good, and this king will be exposed, and this knight was already excellent this whole time. So the only real problem with white's position is the bishop on d2, and his king has some coverage. So knight b2. Instead, king c2, knight c4. So now possibly a threat of like queen a4 or queen b2. Yeah, queen b2 and then knight e3 basically is the threat. Queen b2, king d1, knight e3, bishop e3. Oh, bishop can't even move. Knight e3. I was gonna say woo, but yeah, queen b2 is like a super massacre now with knight e3 coming. So he keeps the queen out of b2, and now the rook lifts. So here I would think the idea is to check him over here, and then also have the rook coming to this area. So Aronian, I guess, doesn't see any defensive move and plays his counterplay move. I mean, these pieces do kind of control most of the squares here. It's hard to get either the rook or queen over to the side of the board to help anymore now that the king's cut off this way. Rook d1, queen a4 just cleanly wins the rook. He can't play king b1 to start coming across because it's illegal at the moment. So g5. I don't know why he plays this one. GH6. Oh, so he can go here, 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 and have knight b3 ready. And then here, 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 and here. So that's why. And if the bishop comes to b2, he'll just bring the knight back to c4 and beat this variation that way. This defending b2 is mate as well. Whew! Brutality. Super nasty. So knight a5, Aronian plays bishop d2, queen d3, and here he resigned. Let's see, if he comes here, there's just knight c4 to deal with, I guess. And he can't stop knight e3 because this bishop's pinned, right? You could have already played queen e3 just in terms of winning a pawn, but knight e3 is going to be the impactful move. So now he has to do something like give up significant material here. There's also an idea of doing something like this, 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 this. This is even better. If you were in tactics trainer, you would have been wrong for playing knight e3 check. Because you had this option. So yeah. So queen d3, that was it. He resigned. On king c1, I think the clearest winning move would have been rook b5, just going to b1. I don't know. My first impression says that that's probably checkmate. So a fantastic, exciting game, especially for those of us who've recently been studying the Blackmar-Diemer gambit. I mean, Rapport's choice to play f6 is pretty amazing to me. Just given the fact that in this position it seems fine to play rook e8 or like bishop d7 and rook to e8. You know, it's not forced to play f6. And this bad move, being a bad move, can actually be beaten, or, you know, can be refuted as far as black getting a good position in a number of ways. But it's amazing that he like plays this like pawn sack variation just so effortlessly, gets a fine position, then chooses to return this pawn when he had simpler ways to play. And he plays this phase here just exquisitely. The focus on the f-file and then the incredible tactics with rook h1. Super, super beautiful game. Let's grab the current game.